Thank you, guys. Good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Lee. I'm an alcoholic. He cut that introduction short. There was plenty of time for the 7 pages I gave him. It is such a treat for Connie and I to be here with all of you this weekend. This is our 3rd time here to the Jersey Shore Roundup, and we also have been at the Big Book retreat weekend. And as Bob said last night, there's just a wonderful recovery spirit around here, and we've made so many good friends that I'm excited anytime that we get invited. So thanks to Jimmy, Mary Beth, and the committee and everyone that has put this together. Great thanks to all my friends who've already shared. That's one of the other real treats, is that there's almost everyone that's here and sharing with you this weekend. I know everyone, and most are really close friends. And so that's a gift you give me when you invite me to an event like this. So we're grateful for that. My sobriety date is June 30th, 1989. And my home group is the Recovery on the Road group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 6 p.m. On historic Music Row in Nashville. So if you're in town, please come see us. Do not all come at once. The fire marshal has limited us to 45 people in one room and 26 in the other. So it's kind of neat to see people coming really early to make sure they get a seat and come hang out with us, and it's a lot of fun. And I've been gifted this morning with the opportunity to talk a little bit about step 3, where we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. And I was thinking as I sat there and listened to the preamble being read, that really that's what's happening this whole weekend, right? That we're here just to collectively to share our experience, strength, and hope with each other, and to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And we do that, I often say that my story, and you'll hear some snippets of it around the 3rd step, weaved into what I talk about this morning, but it doesn't resonate with everyone, right? My experience is different than some other experiences, and so at the end of the day, that's why we all tell our stories. That's what we do, right? Our book says that's what we do, is talk to each other about our experience. And sometimes it's from the podium with the microphone, but more often it is happening all weekend over coffee and during the breaks. And that's when the real magic at an event like this happens. You guys just create a structure to allow 700 people to come hang out together for the weekend and talk between meetings. So I'm not confused. You need to hear what I have to say. But it's obvious to you I have an overwhelming need to say it. Yeah, that won't stop me from filling my hour. In fact, I brought these books up here, not necessarily to reference, but if I run out of stuff to say, I'll just start reading aloud to you. And it's daunting also for me to be here. I mean, I'm trying to look over these 2 tables and not make eye contact, but particularly Sheldon here has really troublesome for me to, while this may look like the front row to you, it looks like Judgment Row to me. And I keep waiting for the Russian judge to hold up a 3, Renee did a wonderful job last night, and I really mean that, and I really appreciate it, sharing, as she said, from experience, from the heart, talking about not how to get our column straight, not how to break things down, which is important. I need someone to help me navigate this process. But at the end of the day, the most important thing, I believe, again for me, is that shared experience. I was talking with John and my friend Alan a little earlier and said, the nicest compliment I ever got after a talk, and of course I realized years later that the guy who gave me that compliment gave it to thousands of people. I thought that this just dawned on him after I gave this inspiring talk, right? But it's still, the sentiment has always moved me, and he stopped by the next morning. We'd never met, a guy named Dave Bars, who passed away recently. And Dave said, "Steve, I sure did like your talk last night." He said, "I don't remember the words to the song, but I sure enjoyed the music." And see, I think that's what happens to us. You ever go tell somebody, "Man, you should have heard that speaker. He or she was unbelievable." And they go, "Well, what'd they say?" And you go, "I don't know." But I sure feel better for having heard it, you know? And I think that happens a lot. Certainly for me it does. It still happens that language of the heart, which is our most effective tool, isn't intellectual and isn't academic. It lands somewhere else, and it creates a feeling and an experience that is indescribable. Yet we spend a lot of time appropriately trying to describe it, trying to describe a spiritual experience, trying to put words to something that defies my vocabulary. But we're encouraged to do so. So this, and when Renee spoke last night, she had incorporated in there the couple of things that I think land me here this morning. She emphasized through her own story and her own experience the helpless, hopeless condition that got her to Alcoholics Anonymous. A realization at some point that I got a problem I can't solve. That's that hopeless condition. And then the open-minded finally, after being at Alcoholics Anonymous, and this was my experience, it was only after being here, against my will, do I become slightly open-minded to the prospect that a power greater than myself will be necessary. And then even longer for me to try to figure out what that looks like, what our book says, right, is so what do we mean and what do we do? Because I came with a prejudice to what I perceived as religious conversation. And let me be clear, I think like other people have said, I think Mike said it the other night, but I had no bad religious experience. I just had no experience. I went to church. I mean, I'm a Methodist. It's the easiest thing to be. Heaven must be full of Methodists. You can do about anything and be one. So the doctrine didn't feel strict or repressive or anything. But I just, I went because my parents took me. And I love the Bible stories, man. Daniel in the lion's den, Jonah in the well, Jack in the beanstalk. They were fascinating stories, but they made no more impression on me one than the other. So I had just had no experience, and then over time I had become closed-minded, right? I had become cut off from the idea. And a lot of it might have been because what Mike was saying. A lot of it is because my life wasn't lining up with what I thought other people were saying in those rooms. And so when I got to AA, and I got here in 1989 as a result of a plea bargain agreement with the Williamson County legal system. So I had not decided to quit drinking. I'd been convicted of my 6th DUI, and they cut this, but which, by the way, were all explainable. And, I was in a newcomer meeting a few years ago, and I'm sitting next to a guy, and clearly he was a young man, and he was new, and I could tell he wasn't happy to be there, just like I wasn't happy to be there initially, so I couldn't wait to engage him in conversation. So I said, "Man, what brings you here tonight?" And he said, "I got a DUI for having a broken tail light." I said, "I get that, man. But see, but I get it." And he meant it. So I'm showing up with these prejudices, and I am beginning, I went to a treatment program that I'm very grateful for, and men and women from Alcoholics Anonymous came in there, and they took us out to meetings. And somewhere in that 30-day stay, I decided that I needed to not drink, which is kind of different than not wanting to drink, but I knew that I drank and stuff happened, and honestly, I didn't want to do some of the things I'd been doing, not just DUIs. I wanted to be a better husband, I wanted to be a better father, I wanted to be a better man, but I didn't know. So what do you mean and what do you do? But the idea that I was introduced to there, as I'm kind of hearing it without help, this powerlessness over alcohol took me a while to grab hold of, but I began to see that first half of the first step began to resonate. When it said, when you honestly want to, you can't stop entirely. When drinking, you have little control of the amount you take, as Renee shared with us last night, and that's an either or question, but both applied to me, and I could see that. And so I probably need to not drink. And since I was going out to AA meetings and kind of enjoying your company, I really was. Y'all are pretty interesting people, and you tell fascinating stories, and some of them are even true, and it's just great to listen to. But my life is unmanageable, and I thought I got that right because I'd making a mess of things. I mean, I'm under court supervision. That's why I'm here. I've got these DUIs, I've got legal trouble, I'm not really doing well at work. I'm like Bob, I said last night, I'm a sales guy that can't make sales calls. Except I was a traveling salesman. So I went all over the Mid-South not making sales calls. I literally drove into small towns, tore out the yellow pages, but back then, to see these little furniture stores that I was supposed to go make sales calls on. I would go pull up in front of this furniture store and not go in. And not know why I couldn't go in. And then go to the next one and then end up back at some little motor lodge, little one-level motels that were all up. I was in Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky. And then I'd say, I'll do better tomorrow, and I'd start drinking and getting high, and then I'd wake up real early, and I said, well, I better get high, about 5 in the morning, I'd smoke a joint, get high there, and then, well, I can't make these sales calls till about 9 or 10, and then I just couldn't make them. But so that's, so there's just, my life was messy. We got a lot of big stories in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they are, we often bookend our stories from the podium around those real crash and burn moments, and they're legitimate and they're real. But I will tell you, and I believe it's true for many people in here, that alcoholism in the way that I had it included those moments, but it was also just a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It is just day after day, tacky, tawdry, telling a lie, breaking promises, betraying trust, one seemingly little thing after another. And I sure had that. But I'm sitting in, and I'm beginning to be introduced to these steps. I went to a big book study that I kind of wandered into in Nashville at our clubhouse there, 202. We're getting ready to celebrate its 60-year anniversary. That's how long it's been serving the Nashville area. And wandered into a little room where my sponsor, I found my sponsor, Frank, and these guys did a big book study twice or 4 days a week. 2 days was big book and 2 days was 12 and 12. I didn't even know there were different types of meetings, but I wandered in there and I just hung out with those folks, and they literally changed my life. Connie and I have a picture of from 2006, actually, at a party we went to that was my sponsor Frank's 80th birthday at the time, and he passed away in 2000. It was 85th birthday, and he passed away in 2007. But there are a group of people in a group picture like we always take, and at least 11 of those people were in that first meeting that I wandered into, and people and downstairs at the half measures table, as Frank called it, at the 202 Club, they referred to that room as big book thumpers, and it wasn't a complimentary term. But I will tell you, that's not the experience I had. Because the experience I had is the experience that a little bit we're having this weekend. There were just people introducing me. We were reading together, trying to figure out how to take what's on the page and go do it. What do we mean and what do we do? What do we mean and what do we do? And somebody would leave and come back the next day and say, tell us how it went, man. You were going to have that conversation with your wife, or you're having that struggle. And we found where that was in the literature, and then he goes and runs the play, right? It's like the difference in being in the huddle and going and running the play and coming back to the huddle and saying, man, I'm struggling with my guy. Could we double team him? Could I get some help over here? And that's what was happening up there. But then we start moving in, and I'm seeing this third step stuff. I'm seeing higher power, need a power greater than myself in step 2. I'm reading We Agnostics, which, by the way, the first time I read We Agnostics, in fact, for the first several months that I read We Agnostics, I viewed it as exclusionary. And today when I read it, I find it as so inclusive that you make it so easy for me to be here under my own terms. You make it so easy for me to do exactly what Abby said to Bill. Why don't you find a God of your own conception? How cool is that? What kind of power we give? Lack of power may be our problem, but then you tell me, pick your own God. There's a lot of freedom in that, but then it becomes, then I feel even incapable of doing that. So I'd just rather not even have that conversation. In my big book, the first year I was sober, everywhere that it said spiritual experience or spiritual awakening in my book, I blacked it out with a marker. And because that language made me uncomfortable. And Frank said, he said, Steve, you're struggling with language. And he said, I want you to have an experience. He said, I don't care what you call it. I don't care what word you put on it. So he took me back to Appendix 2 in our book, Spiritual Experience, and where it said things like a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. And it talked about a profound alteration in my reaction to life. And I was willing to have a personality change long before I was willing to have a spiritual experience. So I just wrote personality change above it because he said, I don't care. Frank seldom quoted Shakespeare. But that day he said, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. The rose doesn't care what I call it. It is what it is. And that gave me a little bit of freedom. I was talking to Frank. I'm thrilled now to be in AA at this point, and again, because I'm loving hanging out with you guys. And I'll be honest that Frank didn't, as much of a big book guy as he was, I'd been to treatment, and we had about a 10-minute conversation after I asked him to sponsor me, and he said, well, where do you stand with steps 1, 2, and 3? And I said, I'm good. Yeah, we're good. He said, all right, and then he wanted to move on with an inventory, so 9 months later, I'm getting ready to... I was still in the contemplative stage, but I would come and I would talk to Frank and other people because I desperately wanted to do this, but I didn't know if it was accessible to me. I didn't know. If I don't believe, how do I move forward? I've raised my hand and given full-throated acknowledgement that I'm an alcoholic the way AA describes alcoholism. But then the book says, if so, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience can conquer. I go, oh, damn, that is bad news. I would like another option. And and our book calls it a dilemma. I had a dilemma. It's a problem with two equally unacceptable solutions. I do not want to die an alcoholic death, but I do not believe I can live on a spiritual basis. So I got the problem, and I believe I can't solve it, but I'm uncertain, afraid of, and skeptical and cynical, all in one ball, about this solution you're talking about. I said, Frank, just let go and let God. That's a nice bumper sticker, but I don't know. And he said, Steve, in your case, just let go and let anybody. And you know what? That's not bad advice to get started. Because first I have to let go. And how it works, they tell us, some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil till we let go. Absolutely. And I'd go talking about that, when you read just enough to now become argumentative with your sponsor. And because he was not nearly, I was much smarter than Frank. And I said, Frank, that implies I never had a good idea before I got to AA. I mean, this implies everything. Is that what it's saying? Everything I did before I got to AA is a bad idea. Just throw it all away. I said, because I showed up here with some damn good ideas. And he said, Steve, that's not what it means. And he said, I'm sure you showed up here with some good ideas. He said, we've not heard any of them yet, but I suspect, he said, but one of your problems is you can't tell the good ideas from the bad ideas. You have no discernment. And he says, what I'm encouraging you to do, and he says, what I think that the book is encouraging you to do is not to say that those old ideas don't have value, not to say that they're all wrong, not to say, he says, are you willing to set them down, not throw them away? Are you willing to let go of them, go through this process, and the good ideas will find their way back? And there may be some new ideas, some new opportunities that are more useful and helpful to you and to others. But if you insist on only operating with the ideas that got you here, then you're going to have a very limited experience here. In fact, it's going to be an egocentric experience. It's going to be a mind-driven experience, which is the third step. Is actually, that's where you are flipping me away from that. That's where you are introducing me to the idea that when I got to AA, I had spent a lot of time trying to do better, right? I suspect most of us at one time or another tried to do better. Now, that didn't always mean try to not drink. But I spent a lot of time trying to not drink too much. And that didn't mean don't get drunk. It meant don't get too drunk. I mean, like I said, I got 6 DUIs and I didn't get any of them on purpose. I never once said when I started drinking in the evening or morning or whatever time it was, that if I do everything just right, about around 1 or 2 tonight, I will have, wrecked my car, wet my pants, be handcuffed in the back of a police car. Let's get this party started. That was never my goal. I was shooting for what our book says most normal folks get from a few drinks. Conviviality, joyous intimacy with friends, colorful imagination, release from care, boredom, and worry, and a feeling that life is good. Hell, I just got a little thirsty saying that. No. Who wouldn't want a glass of that? And see, I got that sometimes, right? I got that sometimes. I got that release from that hyper self-centeredness that's the root of my trouble. And it began to come with great side effects. These side effects were the external challenges of my drinking, the damage of my drunken behavior. But inside, I always felt better after a few drinks, or certainly I felt different after a few drinks. So when I get here, what am I going to do, right? How am I going to make this shift? Because I know now I can't stop on my own. I had tried. I'm going to try to drink less. I'm going to try to drink less often. I'm going to try not to drink too much. I went to dinner with a guy a number of years ago. I was about 6 years sober. He came in, it was a business deal. I'd never met him before. He was flying in, a sales manager with some company. I'm going to pick him up at the airport. We're going to have lunch. We're going to go on a business meeting. We're going to go to dinner, and he's going to fly out the next morning. I pick him up. We go to lunch. At lunch, he has a beer, and he has a second beer, and he's ordering a third beer, and I'm not drinking. And he says, Steve, I hope my having this beer doesn't bother you. And he didn't know I was in AA. We're not having that conversation or anything. I said, no, man. I said, I need this to go well. If that's going to help you, I'm buying. I'm good. I have no opinion on your drinking, but and then we went and did our thing, and we went to dinner that night, and he started drinking at dinner. And again, I'm not drinking. And he began to talk about himself, and he said, that he was in trouble at work, and kind of on a probationary period that had come from a drinking-related incident. And he said his wife had been on him. He said she even sent her brother, who's in AA, over to talk to me. Yeah. Can you imagine the brother-in-law 12-step call? That's got to be brutal. And I'm just there, and I said, man, and we know this isn't a fair question, but I couldn't help myself. And I said, have you ever thought about just stopping? I said, if you got these problems related to that, have you ever thought about just stopping drinking? And he hung his head for a second, and he looked up, and he said, what if I stop and I really didn't have to? Oh, I felt that deep inside, right? Oh, I get that. He was just doing what we encourage people to do. He didn't want to quit 5 minutes before the miracle, and because he hoped. And again, we laugh because we're on this side of it, but man, that makes perfect sense. Wait a minute, man. Let me try. I'm going to do better, because he didn't understand, and before I got here, I didn't understand that lack of power that Renee shared with us last night. I didn't understand that physical allergy. I didn't know anything about alcoholism except bad information. So I didn't know what I could not do. And see, that looks like the right way to approach a problem, to come at it, to, as the 12 and 12 says, to bombard our problems with self-will. To look at this and go, I got to do better, and I am going to do better. And I've got good intentions and firm resolve. And I get to AA, and you guys say, that looks noble, Steve. That sounds logical. But see, we work out our problems on an altruistic and spiritual basis, not a logical basis. And the third step is that shift from me trying to solve my problem to me trying to pursue the solution. It says that what we do here in AA at our best, I believe, is each of us in our own language and from our own point of view talks about how he established a relationship with God. You guys have spent very little time talking to me about how to not drink. I mean, there are techniques. Even, we've even got our book, that gives techniques for not drinking. You're at a party, right? We tell the newcomer, always, take your own car so you can leave in time, right? And always go with somebody else. And this is all really good advice. But it's a technique to try to buy me some time till the spiritual solution can kick in. Strategies for not drinking. I don't know if any of you guys are got the same feed I do on social media, and I got no opinion whether this works or not. I just know it doesn't work for me. But I'm finding a lot of ads for how to moderate drinking. I know there are a lot of them because I read them so closely. And I want to tell you something. I don't want to be dismissive, right? Because I'm an alcoholic, I don't know who that's a good plan for. And AA doesn't have an opinion about that. And working with others, we're very clear that if our man wants to try some other spiritual approach, we encourage him. Not, well, you'll get drunk, get out, No, we encourage him to follow his conscience, keeping in mind that we alcoholics have much in common. Cross the street if you want to, but keep in mind you should look both ways before you cross. Right? But I'm trying to do better. You guys say that's not going to work, that I'm now we don't spend a lot of time talking about how to not drink. We talk about how to establish a relationship with God, and the not drinking falls away. In the 10th step, I don't want to, well, when I say I don't want to step on whoever's doing the 10th step, that means I'm about to step all over you. It really just means I know I'm doing it, and no, this will be quick. But it's when we get back there that it talks about being in that position of neutrality, right? That will neither be cocky nor afraid. And it says, this new attitude toward liquor will be given me with no thought or effort on my part. Now that throws me off. The other thing about the 10th step, this is the 3rd step. By the time whoever's talking about the 10th step is talking about it, you won't remember a damn thing I said this morning. Y'all don't have that attention span. You'll be watching TikTok videos. But it's given with no thought or effort on our part. And it used to bother me because I'm working my ass off in AA. I'm going to meetings. I'm cleaning up after meetings. I'm giving guys rides I don't know or like. I'm listening to a sponsor who is confused about so many things. And then I realized, though, that all of those efforts are not about getting a new attitude toward liquor. They're about establishing a relationship with God. Everything you have me do here is to remove those things that block me off from the sunlight of the Spirit, that connect me to this power which solves my problem. So the 3rd step is where you are turning me away from that. The 3rd step is where I go from being egocentric and self-centered to God-centered and God-directed. And here's the deal, 34 years later for me, I am always somewhere on that scale. You know, self-directed, God-directed. It's not like I hang out over here at about 80%. No, I have some huge swings in here. And I hope that if there were a spiritual graph showing my growth since I've been in AA, it would not be a straight line up. You know, sometimes Wall Street crashes, and sometimes I have a spiritual Black Monday, just whoa, goes down. But over time, I believe that I'm a stock that's trending up. Which doesn't mean there aren't huge dips. So I'm always going to be somewhere in that 3rd step. When I said earlier that our book says each of us in our own language from his own point of view, I use that point of view, I use that as a frame of reference for me a lot, because anything I share with you is my point of view. A point of view is simply, this is what it looks like from here. If I ask 5 different people to stand up and describe the view outside their window in this hotel, some of you are looking over the magnificent ocean, and some of you are looking at a Buick out in the parking lot. Neither of us are wrong about what we see. We just don't see it all. So all I can share is what it looks like from here, what my experience has been, and leave room that your point of view might be quite different. And it doesn't make either of us wrong. I think that maybe it was Bob saying it last night, but we have our own experience. You know, if we listen to a piece of music or we look at a piece of art, we might experience it quite differently. We might be drawn to different things. In that art, someone might comment about the textures, and someone else might be drawn to the blending of the colors, and some might just like the landscape view that's been painted. The piece of art just is what it is, and then we have an experience with it. And I will tell you that that's what it has come to feel like for me in this relationship with the God of my understanding. I would not pretend to tell you about God, but I can do my best to tell you about my experience with that God. I often tell the story, which implies I'm about to tell it, of the blind men and the elephant, right? And it says there were 3 men from Hindustan to learning much inclined. They went to see an elephant, but all of them were blind. And one of them grabbed the elephant by its tail, and one of them grabbed the elephant around its big leg, and the other one grabbed the elephant by its trunk. And they went back to their village. And the villagers said, "Tell us about the elephant. Tell us about an elephant." And the one who grabbed it by the tail said, "It's like a rope." And the one who grabbed it around its leg said, "It's like the trunk of a tree." And the one who grabbed it by its trunk said, "It's like a snake." And they argued endlessly about what an elephant was, never realizing that the elephant was big enough to incorporate all those characteristics. And they weren't describing the elephant, they were describing their touch point to the elephant, their relationship to the elephant. What Alcoholics Anonymous says it does for me is to help me relate myself rightly to him. And the third step is where that relationship begins. And one of the places it begins is saying, Steve, one way for you to relate yourself rightly to him is quit pretending to be him. We quit playing God. It doesn't work. Now, I don't think, when I'm sitting in meetings in that first couple of years sober, and I hear people go off on that talking about the center of the universe, that either they were or saying somebody else acted like they were. I didn't get that. I didn't ever feel like I thought I was the center of the universe. But I think, at least for me, what that means is I can only see things through this self-centered perspective. Not that God-centered perspective. Not where it will say later that every day is a day when I must carry the vision of God's will into all my activities. I quit looking through my eyes and try to look through freer of all those defects of character. What would the world look like if I weren't afraid, if I weren't slothful, if I weren't prideful, if I weren't gluttonous? Pick your 7 and any 100 others. If I weren't bound up by this bondage of self that we talk about in the third step. So I think when I get to this third step, the game has shifted. I stopped drinking in the first half of the first step, or at least I've examined my relationship with alcohol in that first half of the first step. Today, I view the unmanageability of the second half of that first step as not the external conditions or chaos of my drunken behavior, but the internal spiritual malady. And I can't seem to solve that. I can't seem to manage to be okay under any set of circumstances. So the problems are never, when I get to AA, you guys, you reset where I'm looking for the problem. My problem always looked external, which means the solution looks external, even today. And again, depending on where I am on the graph, on a given day, the kind of day I'm having is dependent upon the external circumstances of my day. I was sitting in a meeting a number of years ago, the old Full Moon group that Mike mentioned was his first meeting, and I'm sitting there, and nobody's sitting to my left or right, which may be an indictment of me in some form, but finally, I guess all the seats were taken. A guy came, he sits on my left, he said, "Steve, how you doing, man?" Just casual conversation, right? I said, "Man, I'm good." I said, "I got to tell you that I am probably as in the flow as I have ever been. I am good." The guy came and sat down on my right, and he said, "Steve, how's it going, man?" I said, "It's not going worth a damn." And I started telling him 2 or 3 things that I didn't like. And the guy on my left is looking at me like I got 2 heads, And I said, "Look, man, you asked me how I'm doing, and he asked me how it's going. And those are 2 different questions." And on a good day, they can have different answers. But far too often, how I'm doing is based on my perception of how it's going. And that's how I play God. It's not going the way I need it to go. she's not doing what I need her to do. They're not respecting me in the way I need to be respected. It's not conscious. I don't know it. I'm not having this conversation with myself. It's just there in that moment. I'm cut off. It told me over in We Agnostics that this newfound relationship that I have with God might be obscured. It might get blocked off by pomp, by worship of other things, and by calamity. So pomp is, for me, is that pride and ego. When I'm acting on pride and ego, it cuts me off from that relationship. I'm now playing God, and I'm flying solo. Worship of other things is anything that I have set above my relationship with that power. And again, I don't make a conscious decision to do it. Just in a given day, a business thing might turn into the most important thing. Something with my daughter might be the most important thing. And I don't even know it happened. And then calamity. And calamity can be sickness and death or financial ruin, or Connie and I can get home tomorrow night and the stuff I set to record on our DVR might not have recorded. And the truth is, that will more likely be calamitous for me than if something horrible befalls you. I am empathetic and sympathetic around your problems, but if that crap don't record on my DVR, that affects me. And see, a calamity is anything I've decided can't be happening to me. And again, these are not conscious decisions I make. I fall spiritually asleep. I am unconscious. That's why later, whoever does the 11th step is going to tell me to stay conscious. Build on this conscious contact. This ongoing day-long awareness that God's acting in your life and that how are you relating to him or her in this process. So you turn me away from my problem and say, seek the solution. How often do we tell someone, newcomers in particular, even our book, and whoever's doing the 12th step, even our book tells us, right? That we call you're right, nothing so much ensures immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. Not me telling you about my problem, me asking you about yours. I need to do both. I got a sponsor, but how can I help you? And maybe my problem will die of neglect. Maybe it will solve itself while I'm not looking. Maybe my problem will become not a problem. See, that's when the book says, so this self is now my problem. When I quit drinking, self is the problem. And self for me is that ego. And so what I discover is that my problems are hardly ever even what I think they are. And as I always say, my problem's not my problem. My problem is that my problem is a problem. I'm the one that labels it a problem. What if it wasn't? Now that's, sounds Pollyanna, I know. And certainly, I don't bat 1,000 on that, but as an ideal, I have adopted the ideal that my problems are not what's happening, it's my response to what's happening. There's a story of a guy who was the most prolific salesman in his company. Well liked and respected by everyone. He only had one horribly embarrassing and tragic flaw. Every week when he went to give his president of the company his sales report, he would wet himself. And he wore khakis and it was a mess. And it was humiliating, right? And embarrassing. But the president of the company was a kind and thoughtful man. And he said, you know what, we're going to set you up with the company psychiatrist. And he said, great. So goes, he comes back the next week. He's given his report, and sure enough, he wets himself. And the president goes, I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to get in to see the psychiatrist. And he goes, no, I saw her. He said, well, I'm sorry she couldn't help you with your problem. He said, no, problem solved. And he goes, dude, you just pissed yourself. He said, yeah, but I'm no longer embarrassed about it. So what's my problem? Right? What's my problem? I'm working on the wrong problem so much of the time, and not even externally. The way I play God, well, I have to be so much more careful what I say this weekend because Connie's with me. I told her when she's not with me, I just go on and on about what I'm like today. But I have to be a little more careful, because we don't always see me the same way, Connie and I, right? Now, I spoke at a conference a number of years ago. She was there. I gave what a lot of people think was one of the 2 or 3 best talks ever given in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we got up to the room, and she said, that last 10 or 15 minutes of your talk, and, I prepared myself for a compliment, and said, well, yes, I do. And she said, I would love to meet that guy. She said, yeah, wish you would bring him home sometime. But on balance, I'm not a yeller and a screamer, and my attempts to play God, it probably shows itself most often with my daughter, where self-will, because see what the book says, right? When it says that I must be convinced that a life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, I'm going to be in collision with something or someone even when my motives are good. It says, in our best moments, am I not a producer of confusion rather than harmony? At my best, with my best intentions, and even right about my facts. See, being right and well-intentioned seems sufficient. But if I'm acting on self-will rather than God's will, I'm going to be in collision. And I've been colliding a lot lately. Trying. So you guys are encouraging me to flip that. Same thing with alcohol. No. Don't put your focus there. Build that relationship with God, and that will inform that relationship. That will inform that in all relationships. How do I make that turn? But that ego shows up, and it looks, the pride and ego, as I say, they show up dressed like your friends and like the government, say, we're here to help. But they're not. My ego, Bob mentioned last night that he's telling the sponsor at the time about 65% of what's going on. We tell our, Harold and I were at an event this last summer, and Harold made the statement, the challenge to some men that were at the deal we were at. He said, most of you sharing about 80%. And we left that event, and I had 3 men that I sponsor reach out to me. I don't know if they brought the other 20%, but they brought another 7 or 8%, right? And here's the thing. Each thing they shared was pride and ego that kept them. It was shame and fear. It was, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that because of what you'll think of me, and I can't tell you that for what you might ask me to do about it. And see, those very things, what I know and what you know. I had a guy call me a day before yesterday. He had fallen into some behavior that he felt bad about, and guilt and shame, and we talked about it, and he was going to try to do better, And he called me 2 days later, he said, man, I did it again. And I said, I love you more today than I did then. I love you for telling me. Now, that doesn't solve that problem, but we, kindness and courtesy, tolerance. My pride and ego tells me the lie that if I let you really see me, you will like me less. Let me tell you that is not true across the board. Anytime when that man shared with me, anytime I have shared that thing that I thought I was afraid to say, and because it is a God-directed, it is not ego-directed. When I do that, I am closer to that person rather than anybody ever cutting and running from me. Those things that I think are blocking me off will block me off from you are the very things that connect us if we share them. And we're much more brothers in our defects and in our virtues. But that pride-driven life that's in that third step. And the real commitment that I'm making in that third step, and there are probably a lot of people here that are maybe early in your recovery and coming up on that the first time, making your first relationship to this third step. And you will hear, and it is right, in my opinion, from my point of view, that that legwork is the real demonstration of that third step. That I make a decision. You know, if the first step is a description of the problem, and in many ways that's what it is, right? It's a description of alcoholism. And I get to decide whether I have it or not. AA's not even invested. We're not looking for converts. We want people to self-diagnose. Let me take a look, and is this me? If it is me, then you describe the solution in step 2. If you got this problem, it's going to require a power greater than yourself to solve this problem. Doesn't happen there necessarily. Bill had that early white light experience. I did not. So I thought something was supposed to happen for me there. And then the third step, maybe in its simplest description, is my decision to seek that solution unreservedly, right? And that third step prayer, right after the prayer, and you know, we always kid, it's a bait and switch moment in AA, right? First you do something, then you tell me what it's going to do to me. And right after that third step prayer, it says, we ask ourselves if we are ready to abandon ourselves, I'm ready to abandon self utterly to Him. I'm jumping off the Steve train. And what does that look like? That looks like now that I'm going to unreservedly begin to live by the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, not make decisions based on what I think or how I feel, but look for the spiritual true north embodied in the steps, beginning with that unsparing self-examination. So those pages that we 60 through 63, as I look at it today from my vantage point today, what I see is descriptions in a general way of how self shows up in my life. Right? It talks about self-centeredness, self-delusion, self-righteousness, self-pity. All of these manifestations of self. So you could leave off you could just use the root word self and not add those others. But these are all fruits from the root of the tree. When selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble. So down at its bottom, you can trace everything back. It looks like 1,000 different things. But when I begin tracing it back, when I get to the root, it is this self-centeredness, this hyper self-consciousness. And in the third step prayer, I will ask God to release me from the bondage of self. And for a long time, I viewed that sentence, I don't know why, but I had the mental picture of self being held hostage. But in fact, self is the hostage taker. Self, and it says that being convinced that self in its various manifestations is what has defeated us, we look for its common manifestations. That's what that fourth step that'll be talked about, that's where that's headed. Now you've been talking about self generally in these few pages. Now let's go look for it specifically in my life. Where does it show up in my resentments, in my fears, in my conduct? Where's it showing up? I get it. Because when you say selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble, I don't have any problem pleading guilty to that 100%, generally. But case by case, I will defend myself from the charges, right? I don't see it case by case. Corporately, yeah, selfishness, that's a bad thing. But that wasn't selfish. Because I play God, because logic, because good intentions, even good information will get in the way. Perhaps I've done some of my greatest harm properly motivated and with the moral high ground. I'll tell you what I discovered about the moral high ground. It is lonely up there, right? I can be right and self-righteous at the same time. And self-righteous isn't very attractive, and it's certainly not very useful. So being correct in my facts is only a bare beginning on how to navigate through life. But I become held victim to my view of the facts on a regular basis. There was a story, and it was a Sufi story, but with my accent, it just never sounds right telling a Sufi story. So I've made it a couple of Tennessee rednecks. And so you got an old boy out in his front yard looking for the keys to his truck, which he's lost. And he's crawling around on his hands and his knees looking for the keys to this truck. And pretty soon one of his buddies drives by, a couple of guys in their truck and say, "Man, what are you doing?" And he explains that he has lost the keys to his truck. And as good friends are wont to do, they get out and help him look. And pretty soon some more guys come by. And before you know it, you got 8-10 people crawling around, painstakingly going through every blade of grass out in that front yard looking for the keys to his truck. And finally one of them says, "Where were you when you lost the keys?" And he said, "Well, I was in the house." And they said, "Well, what are we doing out here?" And he said, "Well, the light is so much better out here." And see, I go through life looking out here. And I will tell you my story so effectively, you will help me look. We will talk about them. You will commiserate with me about how tough this situation is, about how unfair this is. But the key's inside. The key's in the house. And that third step turns me, that is the turning point, where I turn from self-centered to God-centered, from looking for my direction from here to that gut that Renee talked about. That intuitive thought as I grow along and finally have some intuition. Hopefully whoever does that 11th step will talk to you about that. Don't make me stop here and do that. No. We're at every day. My point of view is I don't take the third step every day. It's a point of view. I'm in relationship with the third step every day. I took the third step, I made a decision, but my execution of that decision varies greatly, day to day, moment to moment. But I've never said, nope, I'm out of the game. But I have gone a week, a month, or longer sometimes to go, oh man, I'm not in the game. I thought I was, but I'm operating on self-will. I'm back to being a producer of confusion rather than harmony. I'm back to even when helping others, am I not really a self-seeker? The book says, above all. That sounds like above everything. Above all, this self-centeredness must be moved, this selfishness. And there seems no way for me to do that without God's help. And that's the journey that we embark on. I make that decision that I can't do it. Owned it a little bit in the second step. Make a decision in the third. You tell me what to do. Abandon self. Take on the spiritual GPS that we've got in AA. And when it says turn right, turn right. And every now and then I get that message that you guys get, rerouting. Right? Because that couldn't be right. I know where I'm going, and this can't be the way to get there. And I make that wrong turn. And I don't get punished for making that wrong turn. The fact that I'm lost isn't punishment from God on high, or God in here, or wherever he's hanging out, or however. I don't think I'm being punished. I think I turned left, so I get to go left. And I get to deal with whatever's left. But God will reroute. And when the book says willingness is the key to this third step. And one of the things that I'm comforted by is it says that when then self-will will shut that door, right? Slam it shut, as it will many times. But the moment I insert the key of willingness, this relationship, God's ready the moment I am. There's not a purgatory that I have to act good for 6 months to win my way back into the spiritual good graces of whatever power is operating here. The moment I'm back in the game, it's there. Trying to think of a pithy story to end with. But then I'd have to look up pithy and see what that means. Yeah. Look, all day long today will be a series of, sometimes it will feel like a decision. Sometimes it will be a profound alteration in my reaction to life. But we are going to interact all day long. And my higher power and I are going to interact all day long. What do I want to bring to that? My recently deceased sponsor, Don, would say kindness and courtesy. Kindness and courtesy. The high road can never be the wrong road. What if I just took that next right stitch? What if I made a series of next right decisions, not based on what I think or feel, but based on what I think he would have me do? Because when those third step promises were read before we started here, there's something that I overlooked for years. It says, when we earnestly took such a position. Now, we sometimes say, and I don't argue with anybody, that the steps don't care what you believe when you take them. And just like working out, you'll build the muscle whether you believe it will or not. You take the penicillin, it'll work whether you believe it will or not. I believe that, but I also believe that says when I earnestly took such a position. And I've come to believe that for me on a daily basis, my earnestness seems to matter. And it might not matter to you, but it frames the experience that I have through the process of this third step, where I've decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God will be my director. Thank you so much.